Authorities still searching for motives after two mass shootings leave a total of 31 people dead in Texas and Ohio. Some researchers suggest social media and isolation could play a role in sparking violence. Buck Sexton is a former CIA analyst who served in the NYPD Intelligence Division, and he joins us this morning. Buck, good to see you. What about these social media warning signs?
Well, there's no question that individuals can self-radicalize via social media. We've seen this time and again via different ideologies. There are some basic pathways that this tends to take. There's a framework, though. It's not a checklist. You have individuals who tend to have grievances. Social isolation is common. And then they go through a process of reaching out online, finding material, but also finding like-minded individuals. And then at that phase, sometimes they'll find an enabler, or in the jihadization pathway, they'd call it a spiritual sanctioner. In the case of white nationalism, it would just be somebody who shares their twisted political beliefs. And then you look for a few other leaps along this pathway. Often it can be broadcasting intent. The individuals will say, you know, I really plan on doing X, Y, and Z, and sometimes people will ignore this. So there are some places where you can catch the person in this process. But as I said, it's different with every individual, and the radicalization speed also varies dramatically.
Well, in terms of the radicalization, some research has suggested that the internet and social media can accelerate a person's descent into this dangerous territory.
Well, when you're talking about lone wolves who are self-radicalizing, the internet is the primary, if not sole, mechanism for this radicalization. And so law enforcement then has the task of trying to monitor, surveil, without, of course, infringing on people's civil rights and on their privacy, but catching individuals who are on this pathway and have made that leap. And you're looking for a stack of needles or a needle in a stack of needles. This is an incredibly difficult thing to be able to do. There are some broad strokes that you look for, some similarities between different cases. Broadcasting intent is certainly one of them. We see this often after the fact. Individuals will say, I plan to do the following, and no one pays attention to it. Also, sometimes there'll be a triggering event in their life. Something will happen, or they'll see something on TV, Rick, and that could be what leads them forward. But these are similarities. These are not always the same.
But the technology exists, Buck, does it not, that could flag certain words or phrases or messages that are online? The technology exists to flag that, and then potentially law enforcement could be notified that, hey, this person might be dangerous.
Usually the best law enforcement work we tend to see on these cases of radicalization involves either an undercover or a confidential informant, people who are very close individually to the suspected radical. Using computer programs can certainly narrow down this process, but there are a lot of people talking about a lot of things online and all these different chat rooms. I mean, social media is obviously a constant mill of new information. So you're trying to use these tools to winnow down perhaps where you're going to devote those law enforcement resources. But if we're going to rely on algorithms to try to prevent radicalization, we're going to be waiting a very long time. This requires a lot of old school detective and law enforcement work to try and stop these. And look, we do stop a fair amount of them, but of course, when we don't stop one, it's tragedies like we've seen.
We heard someone this morning say about the shooter in Dayton, people were afraid of him. He was the guy most likely to do what he did, according to kids who went to his high school.
Well, this is true also of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooter. We've heard this in numerous cases of the most high-profile cases recently, and so then you have to look at what the laws are. And this is why I think the conversation on red flag laws and ways to engage in preventative actions here instead of trying to deal with everything after tragedy has happened, those are worthwhile conversations to be had. And you have to look at what would be the statutory fixes needed to try and commit somebody. At what point is something spouting off, and at what point is it an actionable threat that must be taken seriously from a criminal perspective? We need to hone in on that and have better processes in place so that we can prevent these tragedies from occurring.
Well, as you said, quite often these guys do post messages on whatever social media platform saying what they're going to do, and then they go out and do it. So potentially they could be stopped, and unfortunately aren't. Buck Sexton, thanks for your time.